the secret to a great episode title that will get you instant listens? Well, I'm laying out the 5-minute formula that you can use straight away to level up your episode titles. In this video, you will learn how psychology plays a huge role in naming your podcast episodes and our exact title formula to follow to double your listens each week. If you're an expert looking for the best advice on how to grow your podcast audience, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new video. My name is Deidre Shen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Capsho, the world's first AI-powered podcast copywriter. I've been working with experts and cumulatively have helped them bank over $1.6 million in sales through podcasting. I myself did over $200,000 in my first year podcasting because I stumbled upon these little known secrets. So let's get into exactly how to double your listens using this podcast title formula.
Okay, so let's jump into what do people need to think about? How did we think about titling our podcast episodes?
Yes.
And therefore, how should people think about this going forward? Because I'm sure that our listeners already have a podcast up and know they're maybe thinking about starting a podcast. And regardless of where you're at, this is going to be super helpful because if nothing else, we want you to have people listening to, because why even spend this time? We're going to be spending a good 30, however long minutes recording this and then editing it and all of that. Why spend all this time if no one's going to listen?
Exactly.
Right. And this is the great content honey trap to be laying first and foremost is what is the title of that episode? So tell us how to do it.
Let's get straight into it. Like you say, it's like otherwise furnishing this entire room and not opening the door, wanting people to come in, knock on the door, ask to be let in. So this is super important. The main thing we realized after looking at all of our previous episodes, but also other people's podcast episodes, really doing an audit and saying, what is the checklist? What is the golden 5 things that you need to think about and make sure you have in every single podcast episode title? The key thing you have to remember is you have to lead with value that your ideal customer and client perceived. So not value from your perspective, this is funny and clever, but from their perspective. So as long as you have that hat on, the rest, the actual checklist is going to make a lot of sense. Like with everything, what's in it for them? So we put that hat on. And like you said, it's about laying almost like our first content honey trap. Like you might lay this a little bit later, but this is going to compel them. Like when think of them scrolling through just like probably hundreds of podcasts they're listening to. Each of these podcasts then have multiple hundreds of episodes. What's going to make them stop and say, hey, this sounds interesting because it's valuable to me. So these are the 5 things that you need to do in every single podcast episode title. So you need to create curiosity, not the curiosity paid the cat kind of curiosity. That's like vague and confusing. Like what?
Like actual curiosity.
Exactly. Actual curiosity, like without that's, not giving away the answer. And it can be very, very simple. Like immediately, if you think about in our case, our ideal client is listening to say, how am I going to, grow my podcast in a way that's going to help me get clients? So we know that they're very invested in their business. They want to learn. They're hungry to implement. So even simple things like how-tos is going to hook them in a way because they're like, I just want the strategic, quick way to get the result because I'm ambitious. So don't try to make it too clever, but how do you actually seed that curiosity and make them excited about what they're going to get?
Yeah. And the other thing I would add to that almost, because I was just thinking about how we came up with the title of this one. And the way that we're thinking about content honey traps is there are a few mental models. And as I said, again, throughout this podcast episode, we're going to be sharing with you all these different mental models. So the one that we actually use or were thinking about for this particular episode was what we call the paradox. And the paradox is really about, to Bonna's point, it's like you start with that how-to. What is the thing, the result that they're going to get? But then you want to actually like contrast it with something surprising.
Yes.
Like an example of this could be, we were actually watching a presentation by someone and she was talking about how she made $1 million with
amazing results.
So amazing results. And she contrasted that with a $19 product and a toilet seat. And you're like, what? How did you make $1 million with a $19 product and toilet seat. Amazing paradox, awesome curiosity. That's what you want to be thinking about.
Yeah.
So how did we, I mean, ours wasn't as, big and like audacious
But
as
it works
that.
at all levels. Like
It does,
the beauty of it. And I think when you're leading with value, that's what you start with. That's the mindset you have. Like you say, the common theme across all the mental models is that you are thinking about what is that end result that your listener wants. In our case, when we listen to the presentation, we all wanted to make $1 million, of course. In this case, we're really thinking about, which I think is a pretty phenomenal result, but it might not be as exciting as $1 million, is really like how to title your podcast episode so that you're actually like doubling your listens or reaching more. Like, what is the end result? And like to your point, the curiosity kind of comes in by contrasting it with. Yeah. And like I said, we don't have a toilet seat. Sorry.
I mean, we could. I just don't know how that would.
But we do have something almost just as amazing, which is around how you can do this in this super quick, less than 5 minutes.
Literally less than 5 minutes.
Yeah. We timed ourselves.
Yeah.
3 minutes something.
Yeah.
Right? So we're like, we'll just add a little bit of extra time for people that need it. But really that was the thing, because we know our ideal customer is time poor. They want to do it quickly, but effectively.
Yes.
They don't want to trade quality for efficiency. So that is definitely the first thing that we want to think about is how do we create curiosity? Like Deidre said, we're going to cover a lot more mental models around that, but we tried the paradox. The second thing you want to do is make sure it's quick and easy to read. So I think our previous titles were very quick and easy to read. That doesn't mean much, but some of them some of us can go down the path of trying to explain everything in the title, or we might be these really big wordy words. And hey, you might have an audience that appreciates that. But when it comes to the title, people are always scanning.
Yes.
I like big words, I like, but when I'm looking at a title, the same way that I'm looking at which email to open, I'm scanning. People aren't reading.
And a really great trick here that we learned from another coach is everyone wants, like the way you should be pitching as much of your content as possible should be at a 4th grade level, right? Which is really hard. Like, what does that even mean? What's a 4th grade reading level? And so a hack, and we'll share this in the show notes as well, the link to this, but there is a app called Hemingway.
Yep.
And so you can put in whatever it is, like it could be a tag, it could be a whole slab of text, and it will actually tell you at what grade level that it is. So we'll share that in the show notes as well. So you can test and audit whether the thing that you're thinking about sharing is actually quick and easy to read.
Yes, absolutely. And I find myself bartering and saying, what about 7th? 7th?
Yeah,
7th grade.
7th grade works. Yeah.
But 4th is the ultimate. Yeah. But definitely not 13th, just what I'm the first go. I'm like, is that even a grade? Like,
that's like university, like college level, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, it's way too much. Especially for your titles, like you say, because we're scanning. So we'll share that in the show notes. Now, the third thing you want to do, you want to make sure you include in your title are keywords. So this is so easily overlooked, right? But what do we mean by keywords? So these are the words, phrases that your ideal client customer is thinking about searching on, whether it's on Google or on more specific sites that are to do with your niche, and in their words, like how do they think about it? So there's some very, very easy, simple ways that you can do that. Again, we'll share some resources in the show notes of what we use. But even if you don't use fancy tools, even if you just use Google autocomplete, where when we type how to title and then your podcast episodes, like that in itself is a keyword. So it's just about searching, making sure that you're actually embedding that into your title. So if we look at the examples that we had, maybe people are searching things like what are NFTs or NFTs for business and things like that, but they're probably not searching what the fund.
They're definitely not searching that.
We have validated. They might be searching curiosity paid the cat, but in the terms of what does that term mean? I'm a literature major somewhere, or someone said this to me, I don't know what it means. I read this on a podcast. I don't know. They're not actually assertion, definitely not why this podcast. It's so broad. So you really want to make sure, and this is where things start to get a little bit harder, because you're like, which keywords do you use? Because you also don't want to overdo it and it just be a range of keywords that makes no sense as a title. So just be selective. And that's why it's really important to have a strategy for your episode. We could talk about so many things on this episode, but we're like, okay, let's focus it on titling, because that is a very important content honey trap.
Yeah.
We have 10 other episodes to talk about all the other honey traps. So be specific, make sure you're including keywords. This is also really, really good practice for your content strategy. It's not just to make sure you have the right title, but you should be talking in your episodes about things that people are looking for. Right?
Yeah.
So this is why it's important to get into this habit and make sure that you have a list of keywords that your ideal client is already searching, so that can be your podcast content and hence also the title of your podcast episode. So that is number 3. Now, the fourth one, which I think we've talked about already, but I'm going to say it, is put your audience first. We are so guilty, even though we love our audience and our clients and we want to serve them, we're so guilty with starting with us. Again, what we find funny, what we find clever, what we want to know, what we want to prove to say that this is why you should listen to this podcast, right? We center ourselves. So it's always about, even if that's where you start, how can you reframe it to make sure that it's about what they see as valuable. And what I love about Content Honey Traps following that process that we did is because we're constantly like, oh, okay, what's the result that they want? What's going to make this super enticing for them? Yeah, I know it's super juicy, but what's going to make them care?
Yes.
Why should they care about us?
Yeah.
So this is already inbuilt into that process, but you really want to make sure that you're thinking about them first, what they find valuable, what is value for them, and lead with that rather than what you think is funny or good. And related to this point is number 5, is a bonus little step.
Oh, I love bonuses.
If you don't want to have to think, I always think like, how do I create curiosity? Okay, like how do I make sure that I'm putting my audience first and things like that? Step 5 is simple: use Capsho.
Comment if you learned something new in this video. And if you want to hear the full story behind how I stumbled upon this little known secret, then listen to episode 5 of the Grow My Podcast show. I've left the links for those below. This video out if you want to learn the proven podcast strategy to magnetize your high ticket client, and this one if you want to learn about the secret hack to use social media to grow your podcast show.